Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. We start our video with a revenge story in which the young man towed other people's cars without permission and paid for it. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Guy learned to never mess with someone else's car again. Obligatory, not my story, I was barely involved. Info leading up to the revenge. So back a while at my other job at an animal shelter, myself and a couple co-workers were talking, and one co-worker mentioned that her son's car kept getting messed up in the student parking lot at the high school. So I asked why, and she said that apparently another student has it in his head that one particular spot in the student parking lot is his, despite there never having been assigned parking at that school. Now, this kid, who I'll call Little Crap, has a tow truck. Not even one of those big flatbed trucks. It's a crappy little beater pickup with a tow hook in the back. If you've seen the movie Cars, think slightly bigger than Mater. Anyways, whenever someone parks in Little Crap's spot, he then tows that person's car out and parks in the aforementioned spot, usually damaging the vehicle in the process. Well, while my coworker was telling us this, I said, you know what'd be funny? Parking the Bearcat in that spot and weighing it down. It'd be effing hilarious to see that Little Crap try and tow that big chungus of a vehicle. The chief of police was chatting with us. The animal shelter in my hometown is considered a part of the police department, and officers will occasionally visit us every once in a while. And he laughed and said, I'd love to see that. The revenge. So to start, the state I lived in, according to the laws, moving a vehicle a certain distance without the owner's consent and without proper towing permits is considered vehicle theft. I was told this story a few days later, so here's how it went down. The police chief placed a bait truck in the parking spot and set up a couple of undercover units close by, and the truck itself was weighed down with a crap load of cement bags. My coworker said she was surprised the truck didn't collapse under the weight. Sure as crap, Little Crap shows up, sees the truck in his spot, and attempts to tow it away. Now, the plan was for the undercovers to come out and arrest him right then and there. What happened was that Little Crap did a burnout trying to move the truck. He was successful for a few feet, at least the bare minimum for a misdemeanor, and then the back axle popped out of the tow truck. The undercovers came out and arrested Little Crap. The camera footage was obtained, which showed the roughly 100 other times he's done this, which of course only bumped up his charges. And our second story. She wanted to file a complaint with the manager about me. The manager. I worked as a 911 operator for 7 years, during which time I was promoted to shift lead, which is essentially the assistant manager for that shift. During the shift manager's 2 days off, I was the highest ranking member of our department because we worked swing shift and admin was already gone for the day. We were super busy one night and the phones were ringing constantly. I answered a 911 call and spoke to the caller long enough to determine that nobody was dying, bleeding, or on fire before I put him on hold to answer another line. The second call turned out to be a drunk man with a gun at a family gathering, which took me about 15 minutes to handle, until the police and EMT showed up. In the meantime, there was no one available to pick up my hold. I finally get back on the other line, and the caller is incensed that I would put him on hold after he called 911. I tried to explain that we had to prioritize calls by level of emergency, but he was not having any of it. I come to find out that he called 911 because a man in a freezer truck was going door to door in his neighborhood selling groceries, during our state's COVID lockdown, mind you, and dared to ring his doorbell. I admit I lost my patience. I told him very bluntly that this in no way resembled an emergency and we would not be sending police because the man in question was not violating any law. This pissed off my caller even more, and he demanded my name and badge number, which I dutifully gave. We're required to. And then he hung up on me. Not 5 minutes later, one of my probies, whom I'd actually trained, LOL, stands up from his console and says, "Hey, my name, I have a caller on the line who wants to complain about a dispatcher." When I asked which dispatcher, my probie hesitates and then says, you? So I pick up his line, and sure enough, it's my crazy caller. I greet him by saying, "Hi, this is Officer, my name. I'm the dispatch manager. How can I help you?" I had to keep from laughing when he started cursing at me and then hung up. Found out later he emailed the chief about my unprofessional behavior. Chief listened to the call recordings, then emailed him back to very politely call him an idiot. And our next story. Well, if it's a mandatory meeting. Back in the mid-2000s, I worked as an engineer at a large technology company. The project I was on at the time involved several teams from different geographic regions. We were having significant design and integration issues that were threatening the schedule. So the higher-ups decided to have a one-day on-site meeting where they would fly in the key people from the different teams, put them all in a room and have them thrash out the major issues and work out a path forward. Fine, part of the job. Now, I had a bit of a reputation as a crap kicker who didn't like meetings, which in fairness I kind of earned. But in this case, I thought the meeting was necessary and was planning to be on good behavior. One of the managers in my team, who I'll call Bob after my late uncle, somehow got it into his head that I was going to skip the meeting, and he kept harassing me to make sure I understood it was mandatory and everybody had to attend. I found this a bit annoying, as I didn't see anyone else being singled out for that kind of emphatic reinforcement. Murphy being Murphy, about 3 a.m. the morning of the meeting day, my wife came down with an acute case of what I can only call idiopathic WTF syndrome, and I had to take her to the emergency room. We're there for a few hours while the doctors put her on synthetic opiate painkillers and work to get her rehydrated. As we approach 8 a.m., she seems to be stable, and I've got this mandatory meeting thing, so I head home, grab a shower, and shave and head into work. When I get there, I see Bob and sense opportunity. I go up to him and have the following conversation. Me. "Sorry, I'm a bit strung out. I had to take my wife to the emergency room around 3 this morning." Bob. "Ouch, what was wrong with her?" Me. "I don't know, she's still there." Bob, incredulously. "Why are you here?" Me, looking Bob straight in the eyes. "Because you told me I had to be." You could actually see the metaphorical knife insertion and twist in his facial expression. In my defense, I discussed the meeting with my wife before leaving. She agreed that I wasn't actually needed at the ER at that point and was the one who suggested I go. She got discharged about noon with a likely diagnosis of food poisoning. I left the meeting, picked her up, and took the rest of the day off. The project eventually shipped, albeit well behind the original schedule. Bob and I talked a bit the next day. I gave him the rest of the context, and we were fine. He was actually a really good manager and took the whole thing in good humor. The only way this could be better is if you shed a single tear when you said, "You told me I had to be here." And our last story. When a CEO goes undercover to do grunt work. Disclaimer: this is not my story. I heard this from a colleague, and after having worked for Johan, we called him John, for over 5 years, I'd like to say that this is very, very plausible. John was the CEO of his own company. He was loved where some people considered it an honor to work for him, just because of the guy he was. He was very committed to his work, such that he would always personally oversee the installment of a new manager, but there was a time when he didn't. Our second building also had a storage department, and that's where this took place. John had tasked someone from sales to oversee the shipment procedures and be responsible for hiring staff to run the storage. Things ran so-so, and it got noticed by John that there was quite some attrition where storage staff was concerned, and he wondered why. Yet, whenever he asked, the storage manager would tell him that there's nothing wrong, the agencies just sent them poor staffers, but he'd sort it out. One day, a guy asked John's secretary for an appointment because he was desperate. John was in, and the moment he realized the guy was part of his staff who had concerns, he postponed his next meeting with a potential customer. The guy came up to John and told him about the very poor morale and overall situation at the storage. People felt like slaves rather than co-workers, and overall people couldn't care less about the cargo. Unloading was a task and to be done ASAP to get out of there. So if it were quicker to just drop a box onto the floor, then that was what people did. It was easier, cheaper to coerce people to work overtime and make up for the missing workers than hiring new staff. It was even cheaper to never pay out overtime ever. It seems even more easier to coerce people who don't speak the native language and don't know how things work. He was desperate because he actually liked his job, but the working conditions became too hard because two of his colleagues had ran off. The manager figured that he should do all their work until new personnel was found. That guy worked from 7 o'clock to 7 o'clock for several days. So John asked the guy if he could bring a spare set of old clothes to work the next day and not to worry anymore. This was going to be handled. John came in, changed into the borrowed clothes, and got down to the grunt work. 12 o'clock came up, and John and the guy walked up to the supervisor because John wanted to know when lunch would be served, to which he was met with laughter and disdain and got told to get back to work. And then all hell broke loose. He pulled out a phone and several security staffers swarmed the place. He shut down the rest of the entire operation for that day and started demanding answers. He even had security confirm his identity because some people were apparently too stupid to realize the obvious. The 4-man storage management team were fired instantly and sued. The firing also held up in court. From then on, John insisted lunch was to be served free of charge to storage workers due to the intense physical labor. For several years after the incident, a weird pair of ragged clothes could be seen hanging in John's wardrobe by a select few people, when opened, right next to some overly expensive Italian suits. When asked, John would just brush it off, and no one was allowed to touch these. And there you have it. Thanks for reading. This is in memory of one of the best bosses I've had. Last year, I was invited to his funeral and decided to write this story for all of you. The world needs more bosses like this. The bigger the company, the more like this management needs to be. Too many bosses are disconnected and only see money. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.